Hi everyone, this is Arcadius and welcome back to Naval. Today we'll be going over the stats clash for the Tier 4 destroyers. However, it is update day and there are a few things that came out. Most notable is the new camo for HMS Hood. Technically, Hood was the only one of her class, so there are no real sister ship names to choose from. But I've chosen Anson since that was one of the possible additions to the ship class. She was supposed to be a class of 5. So I've just recycled the name and used it here. The camo itself is pretty good. There are some spots that need a little work. If you zoom out, the turrets kind of have this funny thing of losing their camo. But I'm sure that'll be fixed in a hot patch or a further update. But regardless, the camo itself is actually really, really nice. And I like the more realistic look of this camo as well. It's pretty decent. The other notable thing is that it was a rank point update in which we were able to purchase some rank points, and that gave me enough to buy another rank point ship, one of two that I have now. And that one would be the most recent one, which is Maine, or as I've renamed her, Rhode Island, since my sister ship of Montana is Maine. This is an absolute beast of a ship. It's pretty much a Yamato and a half with two Omahas on each side for secondaries, and it even has a mini Fletcher in the front for torpedoes. This ship is absolute amazing. It's so powerful. It's hard to describe this ship besides just being guns. Uh, Let me just say, my very first game in her, I've only had 3 as you can see, but my first game with her was my third highest damage game I've ever played. That's outside of events and missions. 611,000 damage. Jeanne d'Arc has 730,000 as my top record, and Alsa's as 636,000. But to start off with 611, yeah, I was one-shotting battleships left and right. We'll have our own video on her later this week. Same for the newest American cruiser that came out in the last update, Oregon City. I haven't done a video on her yet because I'm playing her more to get a good feel for how she plays. I have a pretty good idea about that, so we should see a video on her in the next few days as well. Once we figure out how to play her, and I show you how she plays, you'll pretty much know how to play Albany, which is just a copy-paste of the same ship, except with 3-inch anti-aircraft guns instead of 40 millimeters. And I am assuming radar. I would very much expect the ship to have some kind of gimmick, I guess you could call it, or some other advantage, because just having 3-inch AA guns instead of 40 mils and giving her another 0.5 in matchmaking doesn't seem enough to make her a prism ship, so I'm expecting something else to be there. On terms of update, that's pretty much it. There was a couple containers, iridescent boxes, or gold box coupons that were available for purchase. I didn't really get anything good, besides some free XP. But besides that, that was pretty much the end of the update. So we're going to go into the stats class for the Tier 4 destroyers now. Alright, so Tier 4 destroyers. There's going to be 4 of them, ironically enough. We have the Japanese Kamikaze. We have the American Clemson. We have the Chinese Shenyang, which I've renamed Kamikaze. And we have the British Valkyrie. This is the first British destroyer we'll see. One thing to note is that Kamikaze and Minikaze are almost exactly the same. The only real difference is that gun number 3, the one right behind the second smokestack, is in a different position when compared to Kamikaze. It's farther back, closer to gun number 4. Besides that, though, there's no real difference in the ship itself. There are a few statistical differences, but for the most part, those two ships are going to be quite similar. And then, of course, we have Clemson, which is just a copy-paste of Wix with a couple extra things added in. And then Valkyrie, which is her own special little gunboat. And we'll go through more of that in a minute. So first, let's just take a look at the normal stats. So health-wise, Kamikaze has the most at 11,000. But it's not by much, since Kamikaze and Valkyrie both have 10,900, and then Clemson is at the bottom with 10,600. No destroyer has torpedo damage resistance, so we don't have to worry about that. And belt armor is pretty much the same at a measly 13 or 14 millimeters, so you're not going to save anything. Turning circle radius is also pretty much exactly the same, all about 430 or 540 meters. No real difference. However, there is a difference in speed. Kamikaze and Kamikaze are both extremely fast destroyers at a base speed of 39 knots. With a speed boost, I can get up to 42.5. With all my additional buffs and everything, though, I can get Kamikaze past 55 knots, though. And at tier 4, that's just kind of overpowered. And then we have Clemson at 35, and then Valkyrie at 34.2. So not far behind, but she still technically is the slowest destroyer. Surface detectability, Valkyrie is the worst at 7.2, followed by Clemson at 7.0, and then the two stealthier of the destroyers being Kamikaze and Kamikaze at 6.2. Air detectability, now this is important because at tier 4 we do start to see carriers. We see Hosho, we see Langley, and we see Hms. So we do see the importance of anti-air defense and concealment very important now. So Kamikaze and Kamikaze are pretty stealthy as well as Clemson at about 3.0 or 3.1 or so. Well, actually looks like Clemson is the stealthiest of all the air detectabilities, with Valkyrie again being the worst. So Valkyrie's not going to get any points in terms of stealth, but she's still pretty good. Alright, next we're going to look at guns. So Kamikaze has 120mm guns, same as Kamikaze. That's about 4.7-inch guns, and then Clemson and Valkyrie both have 4-inch. 180-degree turn time. This is important. Kamikaze, Kamikaze, and Valkyrie all have guns on the center line. Clemson has 2 guns on the center line and 2 on the wings, so she can only bring a maximum gun broadside of only 3 guns. So it's not really important in terms of the winged gun, but 180-degree turn time is important for the foremost and aftmost gun. Clemson actually has the guns that turn the fastest, with Kamikaze has guns that turn the slowest, though I do feel like Kamikaze is a better gunboat than Clemson still. We'll go into why that is in a moment. Rate of fire, Kamikaze and Kamikaze have the slowest rate of fire of 6 rounds a minute or a 10-second reload. Clemson has a middle ground of 9 rounds a minute or 6.6-second reload. Then Valkyrie has 13.5 rounds a minute or 4.4-second reload. So every time Kamikaze or Kamikaze shoot twice, Valkyrie can shoot a lot more than that. So high explosive damage, Kamikaze and Kamikaze have the most at 1700, with Valkyrie having the least at 1450. Fire chance, Valkyrie has the highest at 6.7%, with Kamikaze and Kamikaze having the least. So your high explosive shells on the Japanese and Chinese destroyers hurt a lot more, but the chance of setting a fire is less. Whereas Valkyrie, they don't hurt as much, but the chance of actually setting fire is a little bit higher. High explosive piercing, Clemson has the least amount of millimeters they can pierce at 18, but since all the belt armor for these destroyers, the most is 14, it doesn't matter, you're not going to shatter at all. High explosive velocity, the Kamikaze and Kamikaze have the fastest at 919 meters per second, Valkyrie has the least at 811, and Clemson's in the middle at 884. Armor piercing damage, everything is kind of about the same except Clemson. She stands out at 1800 damage per armor piercing shell. But you're really not ever going to use armor piercing on the ship. And in fact, I barely use her guns at all. So you don't really see that. AP velocity, the same exact numbers as high explosive. The number of shells you can lob out in 1 minute. So Kamikaze and Kamikaze can send out 24 shells a minute. Clemson, even though she does have 4 guns, she can only use 3 at a time. So with her decreased number of guns, but her increased rate of fire, she can still send out 27 rounds in a minute. However, Valkyrie, with her 4 guns and excessive rate of fire, can send out 52 rounds a minute, which is is more than double some of what these other ships can do. Possible number of fires, you get 1 fire if you're lucky, all except on Valkyrie, which technically has a chance of setting 3 fires. High explosive alpha, Kamikaze and Kamikaze have the most at 6,800, with Clemson being the least at 4,500. And then armor piercing alpha, Valkyrie actually has the most at 6,600. And then again, Clemson the least at 5,400. So in terms of gunfire, you can easily see how Valkyrie is going to be your friend in terms of a gunboat. Gun ranges, Kamikaze is the least at 7.6, and Valkyrie is the farthest at 9.2 kilometers, so that further solidifies the idea of Valkyrie being a gunboat. And then you have Clemson and Kamikaze in between there. Torpedoes. Now I did make a mistake here, as you can see. I forgot that you could equip 2 sets of torpedoes for Clemson. I only really use 1, so that's all that comes to mind. But there are 2 options. For torpedoes, Kamikaze has the farthest range of 7 kilometers, followed closely by Kamikaze at 6.8 kilometers. And then the second set of Clemson torpedoes at 5.5 kilometers, and then Clemson's first set and Valkyrie at 5 kilometers. Kamikaze and Kamikaze have the fastest torpedoes at 68 knots, with Valkyrie having 46 knot torpedoes. Get used to the fact that British torpedoes are going to be pretty slow compared to anyone else, that being primarily British, or American and Japanese. British ones are always going to be pretty slow. Rate of fire, however, does go into the favor of the Americans and the British at 40 seconds, or 1.5 second, or 1.5 rounds a minute. However, if you do go with Kamikaze and Kamikaze, it's 46.8 second reload, and then Clemson's second set of torpedoes is 55 second reload. And that's the main reason why I don't use these torpedoes. You only get a little bit of bonus for a lot of increased reload. That's an extra 15 seconds, which is a little bit too much for me to swallow. Individual torpedo damage. Clemson's second set does the most at 11,100, with Kamikaze is actually doing the least at 8,600 per torpedo. And then you go all the way through to the broadside damage. Clemson's second set does the most at 66,600, and Valkyrie actually has the least at only 38,400, but that is because she only has 2 twin launchers for her torpedoes. She only has 4 torpedoes total, where technically Clemson has 12, but she can only use 6 at a time. But even then, she's always going to be outpowered and out-torpedoed. So Valkyrie's pretty much just a gunboat. But detection on your torpedoes, Valkyrie's torpedoes may be slow, but they are very stealthy and can only be detected at 1.1 kilometers, whereas Kamikazes and Kamikazes can be detected at 1.7 kilometers, even though they have the largest range. Going to AA defense. Again, I'll mention that carriers are an important factor at these tiers, so AA is important. And Valkyrie has the highest AA defense of any destroyer at a whopping 35 DPS, which is actually pretty decent for any kind of destroyer. That's better than some destroyers at tier 9, specifically like Tashkent. So yeah, right off the bat, you can actually see that this ship is just made of guns. And you actually see in game that Valkyrie will shoot down aircraft. If you put any other tier 4 destroyer underneath a bunch of aircraft, not a single one will be shot down, I guarantee it. Kamikaze and Kamikaze are measly at 9 DPS, and then Clemson just has a couple pistols on the deck for 6 DPS. Nothing too special at all. In terms of consumables, every single ship has a damage control party duration of 5 seconds, a cooldown of 40 seconds, and unlimited charges. Smoke duration, Kamikazes only last 20 seconds as a cooldown of 150 seconds and 4 charges. Clemson and Kamikaze smoke last 30 seconds as a cooldown of 150 seconds and 4 charges. And then British destroyers have specialized consumables. So Valkyrie's smoke lasts 60 seconds, but it's a crawling smoke, so it doesn't just sit in one area. It follows the ship. It does one puff, and then that one puff disappears quite quickly, but another one is laid down soon, or right before that one puff disappears. The cooldown, however, is only 90 seconds, and you have 5 charges of smoke. So you may not have smoke that lasts very long, but it charges really quickly, and you have 5 charges of it. We see a similar thing with the speed boost. Kamikaze does have the longest speed boost at 90 seconds, with a cooldown of a minute and 4 charges, whereas Clemson and Kamikaze has a speed boost of only 81 seconds and a cooldown of a minute and 4 charges. But Valkyrie, the speed duration only lasts 40 seconds, but also has a cooldown of a minute and has 5 charges. So you can use them, well, you can use more than one, or 4, I should say, but they don't last as long. So ignoring Valkyrie, all the other ships are pretty similar. However, Clemson and Kamikaze do have better smoke, but Kamikaze has a better speed boost. So it comes down to what you are looking for in your ship. When it comes to torpedoes, that brings us to all the ships of Tier 4. So there's actually quite a few of them, and this is the torpedo diagram. So we might actually have to make it a little bit smaller for today's video. So we're just going to look at the destroyers here. All right, so all the Tier 4 ships, this is Clemson, Kamikaze, Valkyrie, and Kamikaze. This is arranged in order of health, by the way. We have Yubari, Caledon, Karlsruhe, Ninghai, Kuma, Königsberg, Omaha, Sendai, Krasny Kavkaz for cruisers. We also have Kaiser, Ganga, and Queen Mary for battleships, and Hosho, Langley, and Hermes for carriers. Now, Kamikaze can sink every single ship with her torpedo broadside except the battleships. You can shoot all 6 of your torpedoes, but it will not sink it. The first set of Clemson torpedoes has the same thing. You can sink everything except the battleships with your 6 torpedo broadside. However, with the upgraded torpedoes, the ones that I do not prefer, you can actually take down Kaiser and Ganga. But Queen Mary is actually going to be a very hard ship to sink. Not only does she have the most health of all battleships at this tier, but she also has a 25% torpedo damage reduction. So every single time a torpedo hits that ship, it's only doing 3/4 of its total damage. Kamikaze is exactly like Kamikaze, can sink everything except the battleships. However, Valkyrie with its 4 torpedoes is a different story. Not only can it not sink the battleships, but it cannot actually sink Hermes either, the British carrier at this tier. Besides that, all the cruisers and all the destroyers are free game, and pretty much Hosho and Langley are free game as well. There's only a few variations in terms of which ships can be sunk by these torpedoes. With that, that does conclude the stats clash on the Tier 4 destroyers. As you can see, there are quite a few cruiser torpedoes to go through, as well as carrier loadouts as well. But that is for the next few videos. So just in a rundown, Kamikaze, good torpedoes, long range at 7 kilometers. Not so good guns, but pretty fast speed. And her speed boost lasts the longest of all the destroyers. So she's meant for movement and concealment, I would say. Clemson, you have really strong torpedoes, especially those upgraded ones, if you can stomach the additional 15-second reload, which I cannot. I just use the first set of the same upgraded Wix torpedoes. The rate of fire on those is quite nice to have, even if the damage and range are not as much. But yeah, if you use your upgraded torpedoes, you can definitely pretty much one-shot everything. But everything else is trash, including your guns, your concealment, and your wannabe AA. You actually have like nothing at all. Kamikaze, pretty much the same thing as Kamikaze, with just a slight difference. You have the most health at this tier, but there's nothing really that much different from Kamikaze. And then Valkyrie, the slowest of all the destroyers, not the least health, but not the most either. A good little gunboat with 4-inch guns, good AA, good consumables. Torpedoes are questionable at best. There's some games where you don't even use torpedoes, honestly. Um, but yeah, fun little ship. Out of all four of these, my two favorites are going to be Valkyrie and Kamikaze, mainly because I have so many speed buffs on this ship that she gets past the 50 knots or so. I just zoom around everyone and use torpedoes and guns. But Valkyrie is also pretty fun with her AA and her guns and her consumables. With that, I will wrap up today's video. If you liked the video, make sure you like and subscribe. And join me next week while we go over all of the Tier 4 cruisers. But before then, we might see videos on Oregon City and the Rank Point Battleship Maine as well. So again, thank you and take care.